In the early 20th century, around 1909, when railroads were being laid across India, the railroad workers were told by local villagers about huge piles of bricks that had long been found in the region and that were available. So the railroad workers used those bricks to lay the beds of the train tracks, not knowing the bricks had been made 4,000 years ago to construct the great cities of ancient India. The bricks were infrastructure for what was the largest ancient civilization, a network of cities that covered more than 1 million square kilometers, an area about the size of today's Britain, France, and Spain. Two key archaeological sites that tell us about these cities are at Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. All are on the Indus River system. The archaeological remains show that these city dwellers created sophisticated hydroengineering infrastructure, and including technologies of irrigation and sewage systems. Their streets and alleyways were laid out in a strict grid plan. Everything about their urban life was carefully organized. So they were building these organized cities around the same time, circa 2600 BCE, that the first ancient Egyptian pyramid was constructed for King Djoser. Now, in the case of Egypt and the pyramids, we know a great deal. We know about Imhotep, who was the architect that designed the first period. We know the symbolic meaning and purpose of the pyramid form, but we know really nothing about the function or symbolism of the Great Bath at the Indus River Valley cities. Was it a part of a religious ritual? Was it a forerunner of sacred bathing practices in Hinduism? Unfortunately, we don't know because we have no Rosetta Stone for the script of the Indus Valley cultures. We know that they had made seals. We have a treasure trove of remarkable carved seals that were used to make impressions, in other words, ancient stamps for communication. They have carved surfaces that include tantalizing images of animals, figures, events. What do they represent? We can't say because we have not decoded the script. No Indian equivalent to Egypt's Rosetta Stone has been found. This is the stone that allowed a French scholar named Jean-François Champollion to decode hieroglyphs because the stone had the same text carved into it in ancient Egyptian script and in Greek, which Champollion knew how to read, so he could work backwards to reconstruct Egyptian language. We would love to be able to do that with the Indus River Valley archaeological remains. It is so frustrating that we can look at an image like this one and see that it prefigures later Indian cultural elements in very specific ways. A seated figure whose posture seems to prefigure the seated meditation posture that is so important in Buddhism and Hinduism, the lotus position. So some scholars wonder if we are looking at an early representation of what we know today as the Hindu god Shiva, but we can't say for sure. No archaeological material and images can be fully confidently interpreted without written records. They're crucial to knowing about the original meaning. And the Indus River Valley seals that we see on the screen here, some like these, have been found in ancient Mesopotamia, another contemporaneous great ancient civilization. So we know there was trade between Mesopotamia, the region of today's Iraq, but we don't know much more detail. The Mesopotamian people did carve their seal images into stone cylinders, and their ancient languages have been decoded. So we have been able to read their ancient literature, such as the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. If and when the Indus River Valley script is decoded, we will similarly be able to learn about that culture's literature, deities, and ideas as we have for Mesopotamia. So we have these cities, these archaeological sites that are impressive, important, but insufficiently understood. We do know that they are part of the growth that happened around 3000 BCE at multiple sites across the globe of ancient civilizations. Let's pause here. Don't misunderstand the word civilization. It doesn't actually mean better than, superior, more advanced. Its meaning is actually much more precise. It simply means a city, a society that is based in a city with a complex stratified social structure. So around 3000 BCE, at a number of places, people start to form these kind of societies, which are a new form, with a permanent settled architecture, which is different than the traditional form of human experience, the hunter-gatherer society, which is our primary form of human society. And this movement into civilization is not about becoming more refined, right? All these kind of prejudicial connotations that go with civilization, more refined. In fact, hunter-gatherer societies are potentially superior to civilizations in certain important ways. They tend to be much more egalitarian. They excel at social cooperation, sharing, and communal belonging. They don't do private property. That's what gets developed in the ancient civilization, the idea of property that's held and contracts to decide who owns this property. A lot of those Mesopotamian seals have to do with contracts and records. So hunter-gatherers have much less class stratification or social unrest and violence because their whole economic life way is built on food sharing and cooperation. So sharing is their crucial adaptation. It is how they are resilient, and it was what allowed for the resilience of humankind. So this change to settled civilization was a very different kind of life experience for humans, a very different kind of societies. It requires people who are a labor class growing food, storing it. It requires a professional class or priestly class distributing it. And it usually has a ruling class, although we don't know if there was a ruling class in the Indus River Valley cities. There are some questions whether they may have been more egalitarian than some of the other ancient civilizations, but this is, of course, an open question. Once again, we can't read the writing. So one of the most important features of the earliest civilizations is that they all rose up on river systems. They depended on the river to fertilize and irrigate crops. That's what allowed them to build permanent settlements, to live in a densely populated city where specialized labor can do things like create very technically difficult art forms like your cylinder seals, where you carve in your tiny script and your tiny figures. This dependency of the ancient civilization on a river will also be seen in China's Yellow River region.